6:01 on this, what is it, Thursday? Are we already here Thursday?
It is Thursday, and I forgot to push a button. There's a setting that was changed yesterday when we were on remote that I didn't realize. And so all of a sudden, silence. Woo, that's a nice way to panic and start the show. I need to let my blood pressure calm down a little bit.
I'm going back through the text, but we couldn't see the text messages from yesterday's show. Yesterday. By the way, we had a ton of fun yesterday at the IHOP.
So much fun.
And thank you to everybody that joined us. Janet texted in, Billy, I'm lodging a complaint listening to You Choose the News.
Ooh, what is it?
I'm getting ready for work, and I laughed so hard that I started crying, and I messed up all my makeup. Now I'm probably going to be late for work, lose my job. It's all your fault. I'll never have any place to live, and my life will be ruined. You do some absolutely genius moments. Janet.
Oh, that's so sweet, Janet. Thank you so much. We had some fun. And the fact that we got to do that in public was wonderful. That was great.
And thank you to everybody that swung by, everybody from Frank McNulty to Greg Lopez to the candidates on both sides, 2 on the progressive side, 4 on the conservative side, showing up. It was a wild day yesterday. So,
yeah, it was.
Thank you. And Bob Marshall.
Oh, yeah. And Bob Marshall, it was great to get to know him as far as how he's trying to navigate that area. And you can see how he tries to have a foot into camps at times. And that was a really interesting perspective. Of course, diving into the school board issues over there was really neat. That was a neat kind of hyper focus to that community, that area. And I was really happy that so many of the candidates wanted to come and spend time with us. I appreciate that. And then, of course, all of y'all showing up. Some of you drove a long way to come and see us. That was really cool. And there were some usual regulars. Yes, that was so neat. Oh, it was amazing. And I had told him because his daughter had knitted a little bumblebee in the colors in Newcastle for me earlier this season. And I told him how I was hanging on to that little bumblebee during our Champions League game this week. And so it was really neat to catch up with everybody. That was fantastic. And of course, the food. I didn't eat until yesterday evening.
Same way. Same thing.
So good.
And Bobby comes up, he's like, you're not eating very much. I'm like, bro, I ate so much.
Yeah, I'm like, dude.
He reminds me of one of those moms.
Keep
eating.
Yes, keep eating. Yes, keep eating. If a grandma shows up and you're like, hey, here, have a sandwich. Like, I just got here, grandma. How'd you know?
We got a great show for you today. Daniel Darling, he's the author of a new book called In Defense of Christian Patriotism, is going to be joining us here in just a few minutes. Representative Jeff Crank, representing Colorado Springs in Congress, will be joining us. He's the reason that Congress is still shut down, the government's still shut down. We'll talk to him. Expect a lot of fun and spicy conversation between him and Billy, 7 o'clock hour. Mike Johnston deciding, you know what? We're going to extend those flock license plate readers even if city council doesn't approve. What's happening in Denver, and then Donald Trump targeting those little boats, those little drug boats out in the Pacific. Drone strikes. Is it constitutional? Do you approve it? Lots to talk about today. You're not going to want to miss these conversations. Now it's time, though, for News and Comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, News and Comment.
Good Thursday morning, 38 and mostly cloudy outside. Expecting a high of 69 today. News sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story.
The impact I would add of this funding freeze goes beyond Coloradans who rely on SNAP. This also affects our grocery stores, our farmers, our ranchers.
Governor Polis says his administration is helping families who rely on SNAP. $10 million in emergency funding as the Schumer shutdown will affect them as we hit day 23. The Senate fell short for the 12th time on Wednesday on a vote to end it, even with 3 Democrats joining Republicans in support. Democrats want chaos. They live for this stuff. Suspects in a complex crime ring operating all over the Denver metro area are now one step closer to facing justice. 20th Judicial District Attorney Michael Doherty says a grand jury has indicted 6 people in the crime ring and 5 were arrested.
They were breaking into cars and then using stolen cars to commit other crimes. And in some of these cars, they found garage door openers, and they would use those garage door openers to then break into people's garages.
Doherty says this ring was responsible for 190 open cases.
The ballroom. I think there'll be nothing like it. And it's being paid for 100% by me and some friends of mine, donors to it. The government's paying absolutely nothing.
The entire east wing of the White House is being demolished to make room for DJT's new ballroom, of course. And 47 says they're tearing down the entire east wing to make space for a 90,000 square foot ballroom.
We're also working with the military on it because they want to make sure everything's perfect. And the military is very much involved in this. They want to make sure everything is absolutely beautiful. You can see the kind of interiors that we're talking about. That's an interior of the ballroom. And it's the highest level. And you see it goes beautifully with the White House. I mean, the mix is beautiful. So over the years, many presidents have made changes. This obviously would be the biggest change, but this was something they've wanted for at least 150 years.
A lot of gold. It looks beautiful. It's funny. Lefties losing their minds over it.
I think he enjoys it. When they get angry, he goes, make it bigger.
Yeah.
And then they go, but
make it golder.
Then they make it bigger. They get more angry. He's like, add more gold. It's like a 1-for-1.
Absolutely. Oh, it's fun. It's entertaining. And now, if you remember, Jeff, I didn't remember this, but back in 2010 when Barry was in office, CNN, they were having fun times with demolition and construction. They were just having a goofy old fun time.
Sounds like they're building another wing to the White House, but we appreciate you keeping your focus.
You can't even imagine, TJ. It's going to happen for the next 2 years. All of the banging, the jackhammering, the dust, the confusion, the noise of all places to do construction is happening right here, the front lawn of the White House.
It's a 4-year renovation project. Estimated cost, $376 million.
Just one of those light, fluffy news stories on CNN back in 2010.
Well, this is anybody who's lived in D.C., you got to find this a little weird because I remember going through the Bush years right after 9/11. They dug like 20 stories underneath it.
Absolutely.
And so there's constant work happening at the White House with big trucks and dump trucks and dirt leaving. So it's, I just don't, it strikes me as purely partisan.
Trump and his friends are paying for it, and they need this. They need it. Obviously, every story I hear, I think even from you, is there's no room in there for
it's
events
not
like
small
this.
And who cares?
Right? Who cares exactly? 1% of 1% of 1% of the people will be there.
Yeah, we update everything in this country. Why not do it?
Yeah.
It's not like they're knocking down the front aspects of it. This is the wing.
Yes, exactly. You got it. DJT says he's suspending all military aid to Colombia due to its alleged role in the illegal drug trade. 47 called Colombian President Gustavo Petro a very bad guy who's making lots of drugs and said he better watch it or we'll take very serious action against him. And while he did express an interest in combating drug trafficking, Petro responded on social media by threatening legal action against DJT with, quote, American lawyers in the American justice system. Oh, I'm sure he has lefty lawyers who work for him. There is no question about that. And another drug boat goes down, Marco Rubio.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question is, bottom line, these are drug boats. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
But does it matter if it's in the United States?
Well, these are all in international waters. The boat.
Do a strike in the United States, or if Northern
Well, that's a different matter. Now you're talking about a law enforcement matter. In this particular case, there are people traveling on international waters headed towards the United States with hostilities in mind, which includes flooding our country with dangerous, deadly drugs. And they're going to be stopped. And that's what's happening. And in the case last week, you saw there was a submarine. It was a submarine. It was a submersible. That's a drug boat all the way.
Yep. Today, the Secretary of State arrives in Israel a day after criticizing the country's plan to annex the West Bank. He warns the move could threaten the U.S.-backed ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Rubio will meet with officials alongside VP JD, who's already in Israel working to maintain the truce. All right, we have plenty of news this morning. More coming up next hour. Nuggets tip off the NBA season tonight at Golden State. Avs play host to the Hurricanes this evening in Lodo. Tonight, the Vikings and the Chargers. Stefan, I'm sure, is getting excited for that one. 36 in Brighton, 37 in Littleton, 38 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Expect another good-looking day here in Denver and along the Front Range with sunny to partly sunny skies, light winds, and a beautiful October day. Temperatures will be well into the 60s up to near 70 degrees, lows tonight near 40. Becoming cloudy Thursday and Thursday evening, a chance of showers. Highs mid to upper 60s Thursday, showers ending Thursday night, lows in the low to mid 40s. A little cooler Friday, a high near 60, back to the mid to upper 60s and partly cloudy for Saturday. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Daniel Darling is a pastor and author of several books, including Agents of Grace, The Dignity Revolution, and The Characters of Christmas. Currently serves as the director of the Land Center for Cultural Engagement at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and is a fellow at the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. He's got a new book out, In Defense of Christian Patriotism. Is he a Christian nationalist? Joins us now. Good morning, Daniel. Thank you for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
It's great to be here with you guys. It really is.
So tell us the overall thesis of the book. What's the argument in defense of Christian patriotism?
Well, I think really it's a pushback to the left's attempt over the last several decades to sort of push Christianity out of the public square. And there's a lot of Christians, even conservative Christians, who feel a little bit ambivalent about patriotism. Is it okay to love my country? You know, as Christians, we believe we're citizens of the kingdom of God. Can we also love our country? Do those two things have to conflict? And I argue in here that actually it's a good thing for Christians to love their country and to be involved and engaged in the political process. It's not some dangerous threat to democracy, as many people say. In fact, our country was profoundly shaped by Christianity, and I think church-going Christians being involved in the process is actually a good thing for the country.
What I've found fascinating in the last 50 years is this kind of effort to try to whitewash the role of Judaism, of Christianity in shaping this country, that we somehow just popped up as this deist country. That's what we often hear, even on this show. We get calls, Thomas Jefferson was a deist. This is a deist nation. And I'm like, well, yet I'm not denying the fact that Thomas Jefferson was a deist. I mean, he edited the Bible in ways that I think were unfair to the original text. But a vast majority of the signers were regular church-attending Christians. So to just handpick out Thomas Jefferson and go, well, he is what most of the founders were like, I don't think is fair. What's your response, Daniel Darling?
I think you're right. I mean, even, Jefferson's probably the most secular of our founders, and yet he understood, as did John Adams. I think both of those men would be described as kind of Unitarian, where they had a belief in God but may not have Orthodox Christian beliefs. But even those guys understood the importance of Christianity to the American experiment. They understood that this idea of ordered liberty would not work unless there's a layer of virtue and religion and arguably Christianity in there. They didn't want a state church. They didn't want the government telling people how to believe or what to believe in terms of how they worship. But they understood that for this project to work, there has to be religious and I would argue a good number of faithful church-going Christians.
And how do you navigate the fact that we were born out of lots of conflict that had taken place in Europe over established churches? I mean, for instance, if we want to bring up the Ten Commandments and put those back in classrooms, people cry, well, you're trying to establish a church, and we're going to walk right back into the battles we had in Europe between the Catholics and the Protestants. How do you navigate all that?
Well, the founders, they did not want a state church, and neither did the Baptists. I'm a Baptist. The Baptists didn't want that either. They had looked over the long history of the long history of the church and of world history, and they saw that whenever you have a state church, it's not good for the state or the church, and they saw one sect would persecute another. So they didn't want that. They wanted religious liberty. They didn't want a government that could trample your conscience and tell you what to believe. At the same time, they could never have envisioned this kind of secularism where you're pushing religion, pushing Christianity out of the public square. And so things like the Ten Commandments, I don't have a problem with that because, that's the Ten Commandments is not only a Christian document, but it's really at the fountainhead of Western civilization. And, posting that in classrooms, there's a lot of things posted in classrooms, a lot of motivational posters, other things. That's not forcing someone to believe it. That's just kind of putting it on the wall as a historical reminder. And God forbid a student might look up and read, oh, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet. That's not a bad thing.
I agree. And I think it would also stem a lot of the anti-Semitism that's taking place in education and college campuses, where I've said this, you do not have America without the Jews. What we inherited from the Jews, the creation of the Old Testament, what people need to remember is like prior to the arrival of Moses, you had a lot of tribal religions. Think of Baal. You read about these in the Old Testament. But each kind of tribe had their own god, and when one tribe would beat the other tribe, they'd go, "Look, our God's more powerful than your God." And with Moses, you have the creation of a universal law. No, there is one God, and his law is universal for all people at all times. Then you get into the notions of human freedom. The idea of the Jews leaving Egypt and the freedom that carried through into the civil rights movement that was critical in the founding of this country. And then the establishment of common law. And with the idea that if you do have universal law, well, then we can have a common law. That was the foundation by which our laws were created out of England and then inherited here in the United States. So you don't have that. That's why I look at the Ten Commandments. I go, maybe it would help stem some of the anti-Semitism. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think there's no denying how influential Christianity was in the formation of this country. And as you mentioned, Judaism as well. I don't think it's the only influence. I think there's some influence of the Enlightenment. But then you could argue that some of the best things from the Enlightenment are borrowed from Christianity in many ways. So the founders, again, did not want a state church. We get that. But they could not have envisioned this secularism, this idea that any incidental contact between the government and religion is verboten. And fortunately, the Supreme Court in the last couple decades has gotten rid of some of that, so that people of faith can participate in the government. They can do things like foster care and disaster relief and all these things without being told that they have to conform their beliefs to this kind of secular idea. But I really, mostly with this book, want to encourage Christians to not be afraid to love their country, to not be afraid to roll up their sleeves and get involved and renew the country, whether it's through the family, the church, the community, and not be told by the left that anytime you do that, you're trying to establish a theocracy. I think it's funny every time a Christian in politics like Mike Johnson mentions their faith, there's this huge freak out by the media. Mike Johnson, when he became speaker, talked about God's providence and putting him there and raising up leaders and taking him down. And people called him a white Christian nationalist for that. When George Bush mentions that his favorite philosopher is Jesus Christ, there was article upon article about how he's going to establish this theocracy, when in reality, the words that they were saying and referencing Scripture is really in keeping with American history. If you look back at most of our presidents, even well into the 20th century, reference America's Christian character, whether it's FDR's D-Day prayer or, Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, and even Martin Luther King in his civil rights push really appeal to America's Christian character and said we're not living up to what we say we are. So all this kind of stuff is normal and natural, and I think pushing it out of the public square makes our country less free and less good. And so I think we should encourage people of faith to get involved in whatever way they can to love their country and help renew it.
That's Daniel Darling. He's the author of this book, In Defense of Christian Patriotism. Daniel, why is it problematic to get Christianity out of the public square? Aren't we more enlightened as we become more secular? It's a neutral public square. Ideas can compete. Why not push Christianity out?
Well, there's two problems. First of all, if Christians abandon the public square, if Christians do not get engaged, someone else and something else will replace that, and it's usually not better. And even a lot of secular people are acknowledging this, right? Richard Dawkins says, all things being equal, he'd like to live in a country that's shaped by Christianity. Or the writer for The Atlantic, Derek Thompson, kind of laments the lack of church-going in America and how that's hurt our political discourse. So I think it's bad for the country when people of faith don't get engaged, because Christians going to church every week are tempered by eternal realities. So it kind of tempers our passions, if you will, and gives us a sense of realism that we can do some good work. I think when you pull those kind of people out of the public square, you have people engaged for whom politics is everything, and it's existential. And I think that's why you're seeing the discourse so bad. On the other, also, this idea of a neutral public square is really a fiction, because everybody's bringing a worldview when they engage in politics, when they engage in these ideas. Why should Christians be punished and saying they have to leave their beliefs at home when everyone else can bring theirs? So I don't think that's right.
And two, I think the natural state of humanity is tribal and chaotic. And Christianity has really important values that it brings to the public square that aren't natural. And when I say natural, I think like what the Bible would describe as fleshly, that are just kind of where your flesh and your passions want to take you. So for instance, I am commanded, as much as I wouldn't like it, to love my enemies and pray for those that persecute me. And you don't find that really in any other worldview, because that's specifically a teaching that comes from Jesus. So, if you get into a secular worldview, like it is purely utilitarian, I win, you lose type of mindset, what's the point of loving your enemy and praying for those that persecute you, right? Club them over the head. Take what they have. It's now yours. Yay! And you see that in lots of failed states, that takes place. So Christianity, to your point, has a really good tempering value system in the public square. And I mean, it requires grace. It requires compassion. You need to wash the feet of your enemies like Christ did with Judas. I mean, there's a really, this is where I think atheists or secularists really miss the importance that Christianity has. I pointed this out one time to a reporter. I don't think you've had a gay pride parade anywhere but a historically Christian Western civilization nation. They're definitely not taking place in China. They're not taking place in Russia. They're not taking place in definitely not Islamic countries. So while I may disagree with it, there's a level of tolerance that comes with Western civilization that you don't see in other nations, in part because of the tempering Christian influences. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And in fact, Jonah Goldberg talks about this in his book, that what we have in America, this idea is unnatural. It's unique, this American experiment. And this is why I want to encourage Christians to be patriotic as we approach America's 250, to love their country. Doesn't mean we think America's done everything right. Doesn't mean we support every policy that every president or Congress puts forward. In fact, sometimes patriotism requires us to oppose things that we think are bad. But to not give into the cynicism about the nation, that it's a failed project, that everything's terrible, that we've only ever done things wrong, but to love our country. And I think when Christians get engaged, as you said, it brings into the political sphere a sense of realism. Christians who live for eternity can be realistic about what we can do in the here and now. A lot of people in this age have replaced religion with politics. And when politics becomes a religion, it becomes existential. It becomes everything. This is why we're seeing increased political violence. This is why we're seeing our discourse so bad. But when you have this tempering effect of Christianity, I think it makes your politics better. I think we saw this with Charlie Kirk, right? Charlie was very political. He was mobilizing people to vote. He cared about the issues. But he would say over and over again that the most important thing is your relationship with God. The most important thing is your family going to church. And I think that's really good.
Daniel Darling is the author of this book, In Defense of Christian Patriotism. I think definitions are important. Help us understand the difference between what America is versus a theocracy versus a theonomy, because those are different levels. And oftentimes people want to jump right to a theocracy. And I remind them, that's a different understanding than just allowing Christians to share their values in the public square. Help us with those definitions.
Yeah, I mean, most Christians don't want a theocracy. They don't want a state church. They don't want the government to say you have to become a Christian. Conversion at the end of a sword is not true conversion. But there is a small group of folks who are kind of dissatisfied with the American experiment and think, well, maybe we should go back to the time where, there's an official state church, or you have to be a Christian to serve in government, or you have to be a Christian to be a citizen. And that's never turned out well. Usually it hands power to one sect of Christianity to persecute another. And the founders understood the government, that's not the government's role. The government's role is not to decide between right and wrong worship. That's the role of Christ. Christ separates the sheep from the goats. Christ separates the wheat from the tares. When Paul is telling Timothy to pray in 1 Timothy 2, he's saying, pray for our leaders so that they give us the ability to live a quiet and peaceable life so that we can advance the gospel, because there's one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. So the mediator is not the government. And so we don't want to, most people, and I don't think the Bible really advocates this, a theocracy like you had in Israel. Israel was a temporary arrangement where God was arranging their civil laws. We can learn some things from those things, but his expectations for the nations after that is really more modest and not enforcing worship until Christ returns. And so in this here and now, in the fallen creation, I think the American experiment, where you have robust Christianity but you have religious freedom, you're not forcing people to believe, I think that's the best arrangement. And I think that the founders understood. And really, Christianity has advanced and under freedom, when people are free to worship.
Well, and I think cultural context is important, and you being a Baptist can help us understand this, that at the point that Jefferson, for instance, wrote the letter to the Danbury Baptist, if you were a Baptist in an Anglican state, you had to apply for a license just to go preach the gospel. So, right. I recognize that it can get real complicated real fast when you put particular sects of Christianity with the power to choose the leaders. And that becomes the important part of a theocracy, is that it's not a democracy, it's not a republic. The church leadership, whether it's Catholic or Anglican or even Baptist, they're the ones who start choosing the political leaders. That's the definition of a theocracy. Just allowing Christians to argue down at a city council meeting that we should have strong Christian values in our education system, for instance, is not the same as the Catholic Church picking who's going to sit on the city council to begin with. That's the difference between a theocracy and what America has. But go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, at times you had in the early colonial era, and then obviously in Europe throughout the years, the government telling the church how to worship, right? This is one of the reasons the Baptists dissented in England, because they didn't want the authorities telling them how to do their liturgy and how to order their church government. And so you want the government out of the church, but as you said, you don't want one particular sect of Christianity with the power to to rule. And again, you and I are limited government people. I think the government can barely run a functioning post office. I don't think they have the competence to tell people what to believe and what not to believe. But that's much different than Christians running for office, Christians advocating for values based on their beliefs, Christians being in the public square, having Christian, a Southern Baptist Speaker of the House and an evangelical Senate Majority Leader, and we've had Christian presidents. This is a good thing. And the founders never envisioned this sort of secularism, this neutrality. They envisioned a thick, robust Christianity in America for this experiment to work. John Adams said this government is only for a religious and moral people. When you remove that, when you remove virtue, liberty becomes license and anarchy. So you have to have that in the nation. And so I think as we think about America going forward, we should pray for revival. Maybe we're seeing it right now. We should pray for people to turn toward God, even as we advocate for good policies, knowing that ultimately our problems will be fixed. To be fixed are spiritual, not even political.
That's Dan Darling. He's the author of this book, In Defense of Christian Patriotism. Dan, I want to ask you about why Christians seem perfectly willing. I mean, they'll get on an airplane, they'll raise money, they'll fly all the way, halfway around the world to do a mission trip, but show up at a city council meeting or a school board meeting? Oh, no. Especially pastors. I know pastors very happy to travel halfway around the world. But go to a city council or school board meeting, well, now I'm getting involved in politics. I don't want to do that. What's your encouragement to pastors, Christians, with regards to Christian patriotism and activism in their communities?
Well, I mean, I think it's good we do missions, and I don't want us to do any less missions. Fulfilling the Great Commission. We have great resources here, and we should send them to do missions. But as you said, you're right. Getting involved in creating good laws for our neighbors is important, right? What I talk about in the book is Jeremiah said to the exiles in Babylon to seek the welfare, the flourishing of their city. And we as Christians in America have been given a stewardship that we actually can vote. We could use our voice. We can help shape the laws that affect our neighbors' flourishing. So we absolutely should do it. Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourselves. Part of the way we love our neighbors is getting involved in politics and helping to create laws that affect our neighbors' flourishing. And so I don't think we can be silent. I think pastors should speak up on very important issues. Now, again, you don't want pastors to be pundits. Pastors on Sunday should preach the word of God. People are coming to hear a word from the Lord, not a word from, their favorite pundit. At the same time, there's many things in Scripture that are unavoidably political. There's many things where you have to speak out about the things going on in the country. And I think pastors can distinguish between top-tier issues of moral values, life and marriage and those issues, and tertiary issues where good people disagree on, what should the tax rate be or things like that. But pastors should not be silent. They should use their voices. They should encourage Christians to go into the communities and shape their communities, run for school board, run for city council, help shape those laws. That really matters. And we have an important mission to make sure that our children and grandchildren have the same level of freedom and liberty and flourishing that we've experienced here in America. This American experiment will not preserve itself. It has to be preserved in every generation.
That's exactly right. And it's radically rare if you look at church history. So we're about to celebrate 250 years in this country. Okay, 250 years of a standing republic where people get to shape the government, as Abraham Lincoln said, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. All right, 250 years. How long has the church been around? 2,000 years. So you're looking at roughly 10%, 12% of church history. That's what I remind Christians. I'm like, seriously? You got to be put in the 10, 12% of church history that gets to choose. I mean, prior to this, you get 1 Timothy 2, which is pray for those in positions of leadership because we have no choice. They are kings. Right. They're Caesars. They're forced upon you. You got to deal with whoever you get. Here you get the unique, amazing, rare ability to be able to guide your government by being involved in it. And so seek that opportunity. I do want to ask you a little bit about Charlie Kirk's position. You and I have been involved in evangelical circles for years. You had some pastors that for years kept Charlie at arm's length, going, he's too divisive, he's too political. And I think look, Charlie went on a journey. I remember the first time he came and spoke with our organization, 2013. It was very much an economic conservatism. That seemed to be the entry point for Charlie into the conservative movement. But as you saw him get older and get serious about his faith, you saw that a lot of his messages became religious in nature, to the point where his death and then the memorial was one of the most wild moments in American history. You have political figure after political figure proudly proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. Marco Rubio gets up there and does a perfect exposition of the gospel of Jesus Christ in front of millions of people watching. I mean, if you had gone back to, mid-2000s, this wouldn't have happened. It would have been a more tempered down kind of talking about faith. And so you had this moment in evangelicalism where they said, politics is too divisive. We're third way, for instance. We're not going to get into Republican Democrats. Charlie, I think, brilliantly walked in and talked about the issues that particularly young people all had questions about. Should I put pronouns in my Bible, for instance? Or in my bio, sorry. Pronouns in my bio, not my Bible. Should I put pronouns in my bio? Should we pay higher taxes? All this stuff. These are questions that people were dealing with that I felt like the church tried to push out. Go, no, we're only going to talk about Jesus. But these are issues that people were facing on a daily basis that wanted questions. Charlie addressed, debated, confronted those issues, but most importantly, gave us the spiritual, ethical, moral, and religious underpinnings to think about these issues. What's your word to pastors now at this moment in American history to not just do religion and salvation? We're in a lifeboat, everything's sinking, let's only talk about Jesus, but let's engage with the issues of the day. What's your encouragement to pastors and religious leaders today?
Well, one of the things I talk about in the book is that the Bible is inescapably political, right? When the first century church was worshiping Christ, they were saying the gathering every week to say that Christ is Lord and not Caesar. That's a political statement. When they wouldn't participate in the ritual cult practices of the Greco-Roman Empire, that was a political move. When they would help save discarded babies and the poor, that was a political statement. And so as a Christian, you can't escape being political because by very nature you're declaring something, that Christ is Lord and all the other gods of this world are not. So pastors have, and I also think, stewarding politics, stewarding our citizenship is a part of discipleship. Now, we don't want to flatten and say every single person has the same calling when it comes to getting involved in politics. Some people are called to host radio shows or write books. Other people are called to run for office. Some people are called to do more quiet things with the community. But everyone's called to be involved and be engaged. And I think pastors need to equip their people for that. Again, we're not looking for pastors to be pundits on Sunday morning. They need to preach the word, preach the text as it is, and make application to contemporary moments. But we shouldn't be afraid of politics. And I think one thing Charlie understood, and Charlie really taught us something. Typically I would say, and in many contexts I still say this, that you first want to talk to someone about the gospel, and then when they understand that, then you work on their politics. Many times that's true. But Charlie saw politics in some ways as an apologetic, that he's answering all these existential questions people have. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be male and female? And after answering those questions, leading them into Christianity, which is really remarkable. And he, the thing we can emulate from him is that he was unafraid to engage people who disagreed with him, planting himself in the middle of people who all disagreed with him and having civil conversations with them, not avoiding them, and convincing many minds. In many ways, Charlie made conservatism cool among young people. Jeff, that the typical trajectory is young people sort of reject their parents' faith, their parents' old-fashioned politics, they lean progressive, and then they get married and have kids, and they realize, oh yeah, Dad was right, and they become conservative again. And Charlie flipped that and said, wait a minute, these people are persuadable. And he made it cool again to be conservative. And so I think he did a really good job with that. And he was on a journey. Dr. Mohler, Al Mohler, had a great point that he met Charlie early in his when he first started, and he really wasn't talking about Christianity. He wasn't talking about values. He's more talking about sort of libertarian arguments. But as he started to embrace his evangelical faith more, he started to make that part of his repertoire. And toward the end, he was telling all these people coming to his conferences for politics, all these young men, hey, young men, stop messing around and get married. Hey, young men, stop being aimless and go to church and find purpose. And he was telling people, even though politics is important, that your spiritual life is even more important. So I think he had a profound impact that I don't think we'll be able to measure even long after he's gone.
That's Daniel Darling, author of In Defense of Christian Patriotism, joining Jeff and Bill live. We sure appreciate the generous time you spent with us this morning, sir. I've got kind of a theoretical question for you, and it's a balance of what I see in politics right now and our society. When Christianity and Jesus was out and starting the religion, a lot of times he focused more on asking his followers to enact social change rather than political change. Part of that is the structure, as you well know. He's coming up in Roman Empire, etc., and he has to adapt to the system because of their authoritarian nature and some other things. But setting that aside, what I'm looking at is currently in politics, I see two different paths that are very, very divergent, and I'm talking about extremes. On one side, I see one path where there are politicians that are trying to divorce any mention or any talk at all about religious morals, ethics, or any sort of guidelines. On the other side, I hear some politicians that are saying what we really, really need in America right now is that our government needs to listen to and take orders from the church. What are your responses or reactions to either of those extremes, and what do you advocate is the best path forward for Christians to navigate that social and political structure in America right now?
Well, I think it's, as I advocate, that Christians should steward their citizenship like every other citizen. They should bring their values to the public square. They should apply their Christianity to, these issues. And Christianity has a lot to say about these issues. I don't think Christians are, one of the things that really I think is unfortunate is that when Christians apply their values to politics, it becomes this big thing like, oh no, we're starting a theocracy, the government's taking its cues from the church. But the government takes its cues from a lot of folks. There's other interest groups that have their ideologies and their shibboleths that they bring forward that is okay, right? The LGBT movement, whether you agree with them or not, has their own ideology and their own rituals and their own sacred symbols and all these kinds of things that they're bringing to the public square, and they're trying to persuade people. So Christians should not step back and say, well, I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't want to. No, we should be involved too. And in this country, in this democracy, people have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We have a very diverse country. And there's not a real monolith even among Christians. You have Christians that advocate for different issues. So I don't think it's a real worry or threat that, the church as this big monolith is going to take over. The church is diverse. You have Christians that have different views on things and different ideas. And so I'm not as worried about that. I do think Christians shouldn't be silent, and they have a voice like everybody else. And we can appeal to America's Christian influence. We can appeal to our own values and try to help shape these things. And one of the things that Christians do well in the public square is to make arguments based on common sense. So even though I'm coming from a Christian perspective on, say, the sanctity of human life or marriage, I also can make arguments from common sense and natural law that say, this is what looks like from research and everything else is best for human flourishing. When you see all the data that shows, for instance, that children best flourish in a home with a mom and a dad, it's hard to argue with the data. I mean, as a Christian, I believe in marriage, but from the data, I can also argue that this is what's best for human flourishing, for societies. And I could say that about the sanctity of life, that we know from science that there's a human being there with a unique DNA and a unique heartbeat. We've said in our founding documents that all men are created equal. Why should the unborn be allowed to participate in that? That's an argument not necessarily from my Christian faith, but from common sense and reason. And so, I think this is a place where people can argue their ideas, as Charlie Kirk showed. We argue in the public square, and we reason with each other, and we work together to make laws that help our country flourish.
And I think it's important to point out that public square of argument really only takes place in Western civilization influenced by Judeo-Christianity. You're not doing it in Russia. You're not doing it in China. You're not doing it in Islamic countries. So embrace that. Daniel Darling, author of the book In Defense of Christian Patriotism, out now. You can follow him on X at Dan Darling, DANDARLING. Appreciate your time today, Daniel. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for having me. What a delight to speak with you, and love the work that you're doing there in Colorado and in shaping hearts and minds here.
Appreciate it. Daniel Darling, again, the book In Defense of Christian Patriotism. We'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Well, Bill turned the entire restaurant red yesterday with his You Choose the News.
Oh, yes. Mission accomplished.
I'm not sure I want to do this.
Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do. The surprise, the suspense is killing all of us.
Yeah, now it's time for Bill's very controversial and awkward You Choose the News.
Ah, yes, just like I was a child. Yes, we are being a little childish this morning. It is time for America's favorite fake radio news game show, You Choose the News. Yeah. What we do here is we go out, browse the interwebs for really bizarre stories about us humans, give them even more ridiculous headlines, and then hopefully create some embarrassment or at least some laughter in the process. So yeah, not always a home run, but it's always going to be interesting. And why are we doing this at 6:50 in the morning? Well, we found out that those in charge do not awaken or arise until 7 a.m. So when left unsupervised, Jeff and I are going to take full advantage. As always, we need a fall guy. I mean, we need a partner, and that is Blake Olson, who joins us from the news department. Okay, gentlemen, here are our questionable headline choices this morning. Headline number 1, connection issues. Headline number 2, you're getting fat. Headline number 3, dangerous Doritos. And headline number 4, invaders retreat. Mr. Hunt.
Dangerous Doritos.
Yes, here we're talking about some dangerous Doritos in Baltimore, Maryland. Recently, Tacky Allen was sitting with some friends outside Kenwood High School, and he was eating a bag of chips after football practice. Suddenly, about 20 minutes later, police officers showed up with guns walking directly toward him and said, "Get your hands up, lay down," and they handcuffed him and searched him. Why? Because of those delicious chips. Now, here's what happened. Artificial intelligence detectors that are used on Kenwood High School's grounds thought that his bag of chips was a weapon. So it notified police that an emergency was there on scene. Yeah. This is how well AI is working
dangerous.
On this one.
Yeah.
Yes, that AI is.
Where are these AI? Is this America?
Yeah, Kenwood High School in Baltimore, Maryland.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so the AI thought that a bag of chips was a gun. Yeah, evidently it has to do with some of his hand gestures when he was grabbing the chips out of the bag and then crumpling it and putting it in his pocket. That made AI think...
Quick draw.
Yes, exactly. I'm just like, okay. This is how well AI is going to help us with law enforcement.
What happens when you do the little, finger rubber band thing?
Yeah, I know. I assume that they come in and they just don't even ask questions and shoot on sight.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
That's
so
frightening.
That's going to be fun. Okay, Blake, sir. Connection issues, you're getting fat, or invaders retreat?
You're getting fat.
Yeah, I will not try to take that personally, but you may be right about that one. That's because all the delicious stuff makes you fat. But okay, that's another day. Okay, now, if you're an American and you just woke up this morning, well, congratulations, we're all fatter. Yes, each and every one of us, regardless of your exercise ability. Because Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 2 out of 5 U.S. adults are classified as obese, but they're issuing new health guidance. Doctors in Massachusetts said that they're looking at defining obesity beyond the simple body mass index to talk about how fat is distributed across the body. That would mean, wait for it, instead of 40% of Americans being obese, drumroll, 70% of us are now going to be fat asses. Yes.
That's probably accurate.
I know, but they're changing the rules. Like, we're just going to define more as you as fat. I'm sure that's going to help out a lot. I appreciate that. You know what defines me as fat? What I see in the mirror every morning.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just awful.
We're all middle-aged men
So
at this
bad.
point. There's
Yeah.
pretty much nothing you can do.
Yeah, I know. Alrighty. Now, Jeff, final choice. Connection issues or invaders retreat?
Invaders retreat.
Yes, the invaders retreat. Oh, but these are talking about space invaders. Specifically, invaders from SpaceX. Yes. Cards Against Humanity says it has obtained a settlement with SpaceX and Elon Musk and will celebrate. The party game company bought land in 2017 in his attempt to stymie President Trump's wall-building project in Texas. But allegedly, SpaceX took control of the land without asking, filled it with construction equipment, and did some changes on there. So, Cards Against Humanity filed suit seeking up to $15 million in damages. SpaceX has admitted their fault, has settled for an undisclosed amount, and is to celebrate, Cards Against Humanity is giving everybody an Elon Musk special pack. Wait for that for holiday season, kids. This will be fun. Alrighty, Jeff, back to you.
We got a lot to cover in the next hour as Jeff Crank joins us. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is 710 KNUS.